Hello, everyone. Jeremy here. Really quick, before we start the show, there's something I wanted to make everyone in the Canned Air Nation aware of. It's been brought to our attention that there's a family here in the Columbus area, the Kennett family, whose little girl, Maddie, just a few weeks ago, was starting not to feel right, running a fever, I think feeling lethargic. And the poor little girl now is fighting for her life in ICU. I don't think the doctors know exactly what's happening. All kinds of tests are being run on this little girl to find out what's happening, and I believe they've even found a mass that's growing against her heart. And this poor little girl, again, is fighting for her life in ICU. Now, I don't need to remind anybody what trying times we are living in with this pandemic we are facing, and that 2020 has not been a good year for a lot of us, financially, mentally, etc., etc. But imagine through all that having something like this on your plate as well, your child fighting for their life. I don't even have children, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine the horror this family must be experiencing right now. So this is where we turn to you, members of the Canned Air Nation. We wanted to let everybody know that the GoFundMe has been started for Maddie Kennett's medical expenses. And we're going to have links for that on our website, on our Facebook. That's probably going to be the best place to find those links. On our social media, we're going to try to put it as many places as possible and make it as easy for anybody who would like to possibly donate to the Kennett family's medical expenses as possible. Now, the episode you're about to hear is pre-recorded, so you're going to hear me in the episode doing my normal Patreon rants where we ask you to give us money. And if you're thinking of that, well, God bless you. But if you have been thinking that, let's put that thought on hold right now, and let's use that money to give to the Kennett family. They need it way more than we do. And if there's any member of the Canned Air Nation out there who does make a donation to the Kennett family, send us here at the show a screenshot of your donation along with your address, and we will send you a free Canned Air button, just as a thank you. If you're unable to donate, then just share the link. Share this with as many people as possible. Sharing and getting exposure is just as important as the donations coming in. We would really love to see the Canned Air Nation pull together here and throw some money at this family to make this trying time as easy as possible as we can. So let's see what this Canned Air Nation is made of. Again, go to our Facebook or any of our outlets. You're going to find a link, and if you can't find it there, you can just go to GoFundMe. It's Maddie Kennett. That's Maddie. Kennett is Kennett. Kennett's medical expenses. Just search that, and let's do what we can for this family. Thank you all so much for listening, and without any further ado, let's start the show.
You're listening to the Canned Air Podcast, your sidekick in the quest for knowledge, power, and entertainment. So strap yourselves in and prepare for victory!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Canned Air, your tribute to comics and pop culture. I am Jeremy Colley.
I'm Jack Doherty.
And I'm Randy Hardenbrook.
And joining us today, we have two very special guests. We're celebrating the 45th anniversary of Jaws this week, and both of these guests, beyond excited to have. Our first guest, you can see his work in all three Jaws films, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Escape from New York, and that's just to name a small few. He has a book out currently called Designing Jaws, which has pre-production illustrations, handwritten location, production notes, on-set photos, etc., etc. We welcome art director, production designer Joe Alves to the show. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
And our other guest, this gentleman had an actual cameo in the original Jaws, and he spearheaded the project Return of the Orca, which was rebuilding the original boat from the movie, and another docu-series he's working on currently called Making the Monster, which is all about the making of the Jaws film. We welcome David Bigelow to the show. David, thank you so much for being here.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're going to have a good time today in our retro roundtable. We're going to be talking about just some of our favorite movie monsters. And then after we do that, we're going to turn our full attention over to David and Joe and talk everything Jaws. But before we do all that, don't forget to find us on Twitter at CannedAirPod and on Instagram at Canned_Air. And if you like what we're doing, want to throw a few bucks our way, head over to patreon.com/CannedAirPod. $5 a month gets you access to the Canned Air Patreon pod. What else am I forgetting?
So join us on our Facebook page every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Jack and I do like a little game show and potentially win some prizes, meet some people, have
Play
some fun.
along with us.
There it is, in a nice little package. Let's not put this off any longer. Let's get right to it with our retro round table.
Do it! Do it! Come on! I'm here! Come on! Do it now!
Oh my God! They killed Kenny! Faster! Ay, caramba!
Grass tastes bad.
All right, Randy, do you want to kick us off in the realm of your favorite movie monster?
Yeah, so anytime I hear movie monsters, the first thing I think of is Godzilla.
I knew you were going to say that.
Here.
Was a huge fan growing up. My dad and I used to watch the old, early Godzilla films. You know, just some of the original black and white Gojira Godzilla, and then just some of the 70s where it got a little campy, but just love the rubber suit, love the
70s campy Godzilla is still better than I think a lot of the modern Godzillas.
Yeah. Some of them are a little campier than normal. But
The sets are so detailed. So I mean, from being back then too. So
Yeah. It reminds me of the Power Rangers. Of course, they
Yeah,
did the
easy.
same kind of thing, except those monsters didn't really grow on me like the old Godzilla ones did.
not
You
at
know what
all.
I mean?
some of those were scarier than any of the Power Rangers types.
Oh, much more. They had to kitty it up, you know.
Yeah.
So, let's turn our attention over to Dave. Dave, favorite movie monster?
Oh boy, that's a good one. Well, you know, it always comes back to Jaws because that was my first real cinematic experience with
Sure.
movie monsters, especially because, you know, having been a kid on the Vineyard and saw the filming and was in that Alex Kintner attack sequence, you know, Jaws, when they screened it for us on the Vineyard, it was such a different experience than most of us expected it to be, because I grew up with Godzilla and you know, we thought of monster movies as being somewhat, you know, entertaining, but not necessarily terrifying.
Sure.
And Jaws was terrifying. So I do go back to Bruce as being the first monster that really, you know, made my heart jump in my chest when I experienced it. So I certainly have to go back to Bruce.
I can totally understand that, and it's funny because I am about to be 39 years old, and I did not grow up with Jaws. I only within the last year have seen the film, and so many people, you know, said you're going to love it, and then there was a group of people that'd be like, well, you didn't see it when you were young, you know, maybe it won't have the same impression. They were wrong.
Oh yeah.
Was on the edge of my seat the first time you see the shark come up out of the water, like when he's throwing the
chum out
the
in the
chum
water,
out, like, oh man, the attacking the hull. It was so good. It was so good, and it has stand the test of time. I totally get that.
So my dad and I watched that when I was probably 7 or 8, right before we went to Disney World, and then they wondered why I didn't get in the ocean the entire time I was there.
I mean, honestly, even as an adult, having just seen it, like, it does give me kind of the willies to go back into the ocean, because I used to, you know, just run out there so carefree. Jellyfish, bring them on. Sharks, what do I care?
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah.
Now I know. All right, let's ask Joe, favorite movie monster?
Well, I have to go way back. I mean, I'm so much older than you guys. That would be in the 40s. It would be, and before that would be Frankenstein and Dracula.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah.
We talk
leave
about
behind
that
the classics.
Frankenstein movie quite a bit. I love that film, especially the scene by the river with the girl. It's heart-wrenching. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to steal the conversation away from you, Joe.
No, there's, you know, because that's going back, I can't remember, let's see, monsters when I was a kid. So that would be Frankenstein and Dracula, you know.
Sure.
And that was interesting because I worked at Universal for such a long time, and I'll never forget this. They would throw away stuff. They didn't save anything. And I remember going back for something, and they were going through all these old drawings, and they were throwing away the set designs of the Frankenstein. You know, I thought, why? You know, it was, you know, and they all went into the dumpster, which would be worth a lot of money now. Having all that stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a big deal. The Frankensteins. Were there any monsters in that time? I can't think any physical monsters other than
I don't know.
I'm sure.
Like the where?
The Mummy.
Anyway, go ahead.
Maybe a Mummy was another one that
Oh, yeah.
came out around that time.
Yeah, I don't think like the big
The Mummy was that later though, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mummy I think was after those two. I don't think the sci-fi like big movie...
because Frankenstein started much earlier,
Yeah, it was like 1931, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I don't think the big sci-fi
in the
monsters...
30s, Dracula, and then
I was going to say, I don't think the big sci-fi monsters really started till after the Creature from the Black Lagoon came out. I think that kind of kicked off the...
That's what I was thinking, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
When was that? That was...
I want to say that was like 50s.
That was in the 50s?
I think so.
Yeah, I remember I talked to the director. Can't remember his name right now. And we had a meeting because I was going to do Jaws 3 in 3D, and he was a little upset because he was going to redo something in 3D, maybe at the same time, and he thought it would. Anyway, that's of little importance.
Fun fact about the Frankenstein movie: Boris Karloff, who portrayed the monster. If you see the cover, when you see his face, the side of his face kind of looks sunken in. Mm-hmm. He had a bridge that he intentionally took out so his cheek would sink in like and that to add to the effect of.
So it
like,
wasn't just makeup that did it.
No, he took a whole bridge out to make his face sink in like that, and it added so much. I think it looks like
set the standard. Any Frankenstein you make anymore.
When it was a replacement, like false teeth, a whole unit.
Yeah, that's what I understand. He had like in the side of his mouth.
I don't think they did bridges and implants much at that time.
I don't know what they had, but that's what I had heard, that he had some kind of removable bridge or something that he removed his teeth there.
Well, it was probably, people had false teeth. Well, the whole thing was just, a unit that you put in.
I see.
I think bridges and implants didn't come too much later.
That would make sense.
Yeah, anyway,
makes sense.
But it was probably just false teeth that he removed.
I'll have to tweak my facts. All right, that brings us over to Jack.
Mine goes a little bit more kiddie, I guess, and with animation. But one of my favorite movie monsters was the Iron Giant. Even though he technically wasn't a monster, but at the same time he was a big giant robot.
Well, I mean, kind of very much like Frankenstein's monster, misunderstood.
Well, that's true, yeah. I mean, when he saw weapons, then he turned into something that was pretty scary.
Well, that's true, he did.
It's not like I saw it when I was a kid, too, and was like, oh my gosh, I was scared. It was kind of scary seeing him transform into that big old weapon, even watching it as a teenager.
Sure, he was enormous. He was enormous. I haven't seen that in so long. Was that Shia LaBeouf who voiced the kid in that? Who?
I don't know.
Can't remember.
I remember there was the jazz singer.
Was Vin Diesel? Vin Diesel was
the robot,
the robot. I see. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember who the kid was.
I can't remember. It's unimportant. It's unimportant. I guess my pick is going to be, and this is going to come as no big surprise to anyone here, but the T-Rex from the first Jurassic Park.
Oh, yes.
There have been so many installments of this franchise to come out after the first one, and they all lean so heavily on CGI, which I don't, not to say it looks bad, because a lot of them look good, but at the same time, the first few steps that T-Rex takes out of the broken fence between those Jeeps and lets that roar out, it doesn't matter how many times you see it, it looks horrifying, it sounds horrifying, it's just, I can't get desensitized to it, and I kind of like that, you know what I mean?
I still can't get over that it took being on this show to find out that it was actually a lot of practical effects for that dinosaur.
Oh, yeah. That T-Rex was an animatronic on that scene there,
no idea.
Yeah.
Jack's like, that wasn't real?
Well, I thought it was all CG. It's just like, a lot of them were, but yeah, I didn't realize
they tried to keep that one as practical as possible and just filled in, some shots had to be CG. I think so. Some of the raptor scenes, obviously that brontosaurus, that'd have been one.
What about running when he was chasing the truck?
I imagine that had to be CG. Yeah. I can't imagine they were making that animatronic plow through trees.
Actually, it was just a guy in a normal sized suit running after a remote control car.
They looked back to Godzilla for inspiration. All right. I think that's probably good. We should probably move on with the conversation. You guys good? Mm-hmm. Any other favorites anybody wanted to list before we moved on?
Gremlins.
Oh, Gremlins.
Well, I did work on a monster. I did work on a monster that was animated many years ago called the Id for Forbidden Planet.
Really?
If anybody had seen that?
I think I have. That's
I think I have too.
That's the one that kept like constantly evolving throughout the movie, right?
Yeah. Then it gets caught into this electronic thing, and it comes out sort of this electronic monster, and that was all hand animated, and I was I was the assistant animator on that project. I was 19 years old. That was back in the 50s.
That is so cool. I love hearing this. Yeah. And I guess I'm not, unless anybody else had any other monsters they wanted to get off their chest really quick.
Nope, mine was
great. Well, the only other one I would add the xenomorph from Alien, which only came out 4 years after Jaws.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I thought they did a really great job. Again, all practical. We didn't have any, CGI involved in films at that point.
Right.
And I think Ridley Scott really borrowed a lot from Jaws in terms of minimizing the appearance of the creature and just hinting to the alien being, in certain spots and letting you feel like one of the crew members looking down those corridors, not sure whether or not you were going to run into it or not. And I thought they did a fantastic job on just creating suspense in the dead space of that ship. And just a really, and again, a Leviathan creature that has no sort of motivations or can't be reasoned with, or it's just basically a killing machine.
Right.
And you're just sort of waiting to either be avoided or be encountered.
Yeah. And of all I guess I haven't even seen all the Alien films, but of all of them I have seen, in that first one, if you can get like a really good look of the xenomorph, of the person in that outfit, it doesn't look great. But like Dave is saying, they did such a great job of, I guess, not putting the spotlight, always keeping it lurking in the shadows, only catching hints of it here and there. And it was so suspenseful. It's so suspenseful.
And a lot of times you weren't sure if you were looking at like on the walls and stuff.
Yeah, like when it was asleep in the cords and stuff.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that one again now. I guess one more I'll mention really quick was from the M. Night Shyamalan movie Signs. And it's not even so much the monster itself. It's just kind of the way they presented it. That movie was about aliens coming to Earth, invading and whatnot. And you never get a really good glimpse of the alien until the end.
Right.
But there's a scene of that movie where they're watching the news. Mm-hmm. And a reporter comes on and says this was taken at a kid's birthday party today. Brace yourself. This is kind of jarring, what you're about to see. And, they take a shot up the alley and you just see really quick one of these aliens step sideways, walk across this alley. You don't see him more than a second. You can't even get any detail. But I tell you, when I saw that in the theater, I guess it's also the prefaces of, the breaking news thing coming in, them setting you up like what you're about to see, maybe that had something to do with it. But it was horrifying.
Yeah.
Hands down, horrifying.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah. And a good note to end on, I suppose. Man, I'd almost rather deal with those aliens than the pandemics we're dealing with,
Easy.
But, all right, let's turn our attention over to Joe and David and get excited about Jaws. But, before I actually dig straight into Jaws, Joe, one question I wanted to ask with you, because I've heard a lot of interviews, read a lot of stuff with you, and typically most people seem to start right at Jaws. And don't get me wrong, we're getting there. But I am very curious, where does your journey just into the Hollywood world, into the business begin initially?
Well, that would be Forbidden Planet. It was 1955. I was in art school, and it was very, very strange. I was second year, going to my third year. I was very young. I got out of high school. I just turned 17. And I was down in L.A. and I lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco. So I wanted to get a job to stay in L.A. And this friend of mine said, "Oh, my wife's father works at Disney. So happens he's the guy that hired the animators." So he said, "I got to get a job sweeping up." Anyway, I try to make this as quick as I can. He said, "Bring your portfolio," and I thought, well, I didn't think I was ready. And anyway, I brought my portfolio. He said I was too late for the program to teach you how to do Mickey Mouse, but he could put me in special effects. And I went in special effects, and Josh Better was the king of special effects. He did Night in Bald Mountain. He did The Fire and Bambi and all this. Anyway, long story short, I started working for his breakdown artist. And normally you start as a trainee, breakdown, in between here, and it goes on for 6 years to become an assistant. In a few months, the woman I was working for, she left. His assistant had to go to the hospital. So I was 19, working as his assistant after a couple months, and doing the id for Forbidden Planet. And that's how my initial start in the business, it went on from there.
And what year was this again, approximately?
Well, that was 55, and 57 I left. I really wanted to do live action, so I worked at a little theater, the Hollywood Playhouse. I did set designs, the drafting, architectural drawings and illustrations. I got a portfolio, and then checked with the union, and they said when nobody's available, you could go look for a job. And I did, and I got my first job. And then what happened in those days was the studio system, Fox, Paramount, whatever. When you're new at the thing, you're the last to be hired and the first to be fired. So when I worked on Mutiny on the Bounty, the one with Marlon Brando, I worked on My Fair Lady, I worked on all these movies, just doing a little bit of this and that. And when they finished that, then you went off to another studio. And then sort of my home became Universal, and I became a senior set designer, and I worked on Mad World for like months and months and months. And then I became an assistant art director, and I was fortunate to work on Elvis Presley's last movie, Change of Habit. And then I worked with Hitchcock on Torn Curtain. And then my big break, I became an art director, and then Night Gallery was a very big break in my life to do that series for 3 years.
Incredible, so much work. But I mean, you see how you get how one gets so good at their craft. So, where does then Jaws first appear in your career? I mean, were you there from the conception, or were you brought on a little later? Sound like you had a ton of experience under your belt by the time Jaws come along.
Oh, I was on Jaws before Spielberg. What happened was I had met Steven on Night Gallery. Then we did 2 episodes of a television series called The Psychiatrist, and I think there were about 6, and that was canceled. Then I did his first film, Sugarland Express, first theatrical release, and Richard Zanuck and David Brown were the producers, and they were big heavyweights. I mean, they did The Sting, Butch Cassidy, and Sundance Kid, and all that. In any case, I was working at Universal as a staff art director. In other words, there's a head of the art department, and he tells you what you're going to do. Oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. So it's pretty much assigned to you your work. So it was a very unusual thing. I was doing a television movie. They were called Movies of the Week. I was doing the Double Indemnity. And it was a lot of locations, so I didn't have too much work. I just had to find locations. Anyway, I get a call from David Brown. And David, big-time producer, his wife, Helen Gurley Brown, was the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine, and she was reading these galley sheets of this book called Jaws, a new writer, Peter Benchley. And he said, she thinks this might make a good movie, Joe, and just wondered if you could send you the galley sheets, and if you could do some illustrations to point out the activity of the shark, and then we could see if we could sell this to the studio. Now, he didn't have a charge number, so he basically I did it for nothing. I told the head of the art department, and he said, "Oh, fine, Zanuck and Brown, they're big deals." So what happened is after I checked my sets for Double Indemnity, I'd come to the office and I started doing shark drawings based on the galley sheets. And I would go over to Stevens cabana, and because we were friends after doing Sugarland, and I was saying, I think this is going to be pretty exciting. And he said, he wanted to do a pirate movie. Anyway, then they were, Zanuck and Brown were talking about this other guy doing the movie, but they didn't like him because he kept calling it a whale. All right, so finally, after I got, and all the drawings pretty much are in the book. They're the illustrated charcoal drawing ones. And those are based on the book. So then we had a meeting with all the department heads. That was very important to have department heads. You had a head of photography, editing, special effects, art department stuff. So Marshall Green was the head of production. And we had a meeting with all those guys, and Stephen had just been brought on. So I go through my whole big spiel about then the shark does this and the shark does that. And in my conversations with Stephen prior to the meeting, we said if we were going to do this, we wanted to do like a big shark, bigger than normal, 25 feet, in the real ocean, animated shark in the real ocean, which really had never been done. Because mostly they do miniatures or they do it on the back lot in a lake against a backdrop. Anyway, so I do my whole big spiel, and then Marshall Green turns to the effects department and said, can you guys make this shark? And they said, no, I mean, it's never been done. I mean, it could take a year and a half, to see if you could do it in the real ocean. And besides, we have bigger movies like the Hindenburg, and so Marshall got a little upset, and he said, well, Jaws could be a bigger movie than the Hindenburg. And everybody laughed because the Hindenburg was the big movie. Sure. And Jaws was just a shark movie, a small, cheap shark movie. So the meeting broke up. I was collecting my drawings, and Marshall called me back. And Marshall lived on a boat, so he sort of had an attraction to this idea of this water movie. And he said, can you get the shark made? And I said, well, sure, I'll certainly try. And he says, all right, we'll take it off the lot. And everything was done in-house at those times. He did it at Universal, did it in their effects department, whatever. So he said, well, find somebody to do it, some people, put a group together, and take it off the lot. Don't do anything on the lot. So basically that was it. I was given the total autonomy to go make a shark and get a crew. And so that was sort of unusual. Wow. And then I started working with an ichthyologist and doing models and the sculptor of the thing. And so that's basically how it started. So I was probably, before Stephen, before we had a crew,
That's incredible.
That was the beginning.
And the idea was laughed at.
Yeah.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah, right.
Now, who's
Dave,
laughing now? Well, so it started that way, and I just have to point this out. I always have to clarify this because they say the shark didn't work, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody, I went to Disney, and I talked to other people, Joe Lombardo, who did Godfathers and stuff, effects guy. He said it would take a year and a half to build this thing and test it in the ocean. And so I put together a crew. I found Bob Matty, who had done the Giant Squid and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and was sort of retired. We put together a crew of people, Roy Arbogast, who did all the skins and plastics. And that was probably November of 73. So they really didn't get everything started working until, November, December of 73. The book came out in 74, and it was such a success. The studio said, we've got to start shooting this in 2 months.
Oh, wow.
So where's my year and a half? We were like 3 months into building it when we had to take whatever we had and go to Martha's Vineyard and try to continue to build it and test it. And so it was extremely difficult, and I got very upset when we were over schedule, over budget, because we had to test it. And if it worked, we shot it. If it didn't work, it was a test. And I explained that to everyone. And so as we went over our schedule and over budget, then everybody blamed the shark. Oh, the shark didn't work. Well, if you look at my book, there's about 200 storyboards, and there's a lot of sharks. And every shark drawing, we got that shot. So we got every shot that we wanted. We didn't substitute the barrels because we didn't have a shark. We used the barrels because they were like a Hitchcock thing. The shark is there. Sure. So I have to defend this all the time because I still hear this from critics and talk shows, and they say, well, the shark didn't work, so you didn't, that's nonsense. Okay?
Yeah.
I got that out of my...
Well, it seems like it's important to clarify, though. Yeah, for
absolutely.
Sure. David, I wanted to ask you. You said earlier in the episode you were already living at Martha's Vineyard. How did you end up in the film?
I was a 5-year-old kid. I'd only lived on the vineyard about a year before the film arrived. And I was at Oak Bluffs Elementary School. Oak Bluffs is one of the towns on Martha's Vineyard. Coincidentally, Oak Bluffs Harbor is where they had what was called Shark City, where most of the sharks were kept, when they weren't shooting, and they were on these platform barges that they built. So, we were aware of the film. The local newspapers, the Gazette and the MV Times and other papers were basically, that was the conduit that they were putting out the casting calls, that they were casting extras.
I see.
And because they, Jaws relied so heavily upon the locals of Martha's Vineyard, from extras like me to people who had boats, just a great deal of people. When Joe talks about going off the lot, they came with a pretty sizable crew. But the challenges on the film really required, as much collaboration between vineyard people and Hollywood people as they could possibly pull together. And in many cases, it was critical to the success of being able to make some things happen. Because I think, and Joe will attest that, understanding the Atlantic Ocean in New England is, it may seem to be, calm in one period of time, and then it's a torrent and there's currents and that there's, it's a rough ocean up here. So, so anyway, I actually there's not a lot of people who can say that in kindergarten they had a drama teacher. But my drama teacher in kindergarten in Oak Bluffs was Lee Fierro, who plays Mrs. Kintner. And Lee was an accomplished actress in New York City who relocated to Martha's Vineyard. And she was just a really wonderful woman. She did the children's theater on the island. She was at the school teaching drama classes. She ran the island theater workshops, and really made a mark for herself as an actress who wanted to teach and share the love of theater and acting with as many people as she could possibly reach. So I was in class with her one day. Jaws was in town. We were all aware of it, and people were going for casting calls. But Lee said at the end of one of our classes, she goes, by the way, I've been cast in Jaws, and we're shooting a scene, and we need some kids to come down to where we're shooting near the big bridge. And a lot of people today call it Jaws Bridge because it's the bridge everybody sees in the movie during the 4th of July sequence.
Right.
But at the time, we knew it as Big Bridge because on State Beach, there's a little bridge that's just past the golf course, and then you go another mile and a half down the road, and there's the Big Bridge. So I was actually taking swimming lessons that were mandated by the town of Oak Bluffs, as you know, every little kid needed to take swimming lessons just for public safety. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to go down to Big Bridge because Lee said that they're shooting the movie and they needed some kids to come down. And it's funny because you guys all, it sounds like everybody's pretty much younger than Joe and I. I'm a lot younger than Joe, and you guys are younger than me. But in 1974, on Martha's Vineyard, it was not uncommon to see a little kid like me stick my thumb out and hitchhike to get down to places on the island. And so I was hitchhiking, and that's how I got from the swimming lesson location. I was at Inkwell Beach, and then I went down to Big Bridge, which is probably about a 2.5 mile stretch between the two. And I hitchhiked down and got to the set. And the set was the Alex Kintner attack sequence with Roy Scheider sitting in the chair there on the beach, and Lee Fierro with her son Alex, played by Jeff Voorhees. Jeff is actually still on the vineyard, and he manages the Wharf restaurant in Edgartown. And if you want to go in and get a signed T-shirt by Jeff, he goes, I got killed by Jaws here on this beach, and Jeff's a really fun guy. And there's a lot of vineyarders that were involved in the film who are down there, who are either extras or, worked on a boat or what have you. So you'll find plenty of them. And the vineyard still very, very much looks like the same location because it does very much, it's a quaint New England sea village, fishing area. It's gotten a lot more built up over time. There's a lot more people that go there. We started having presidents show up, and after Jaws, it was no longer that big of a secret. And now to this day, it's one of the most popular destinations for people during the summer. Right. Forget it. If you want to get a ferry reservation between June and August during the weekend, you have to make it in January. Yep. It's that busy now. So anyway, my sequence, I didn't know what to expect. I was a 5-year-old kid, and I was expecting, I think I kind of pictured, a camera guy and then a couple people and telling, whatever I pictured a movie was. It was a lot smaller than what I actually ran into, which was, the huge lights, the Griffin electric truck set up, lots of people running around. There was many extras for that scene, so there was quite a lot of people. And this stuff was shot early spring. This was not, Joe did his scouting in about December, and there was still snow on the ground when he was there finding the island, which is a great little story because Joe was supposed to go to Nantucket, and because of the weather, the ferry wasn't running to Nantucket, so he ended up taking a ferry to Martha's Vineyard because it was available, and that's how he discovered the vineyard, which the more he saw the place between Menemsha and Edgartown and everything that he saw, it just proved to be a great place, plus the 25-foot depth of the water to be able to set up the platform shark.
I see.
So there were some components that, and Peter Benchley had told Joe, you really go to Nantucket, there's nothing on the vineyard. And, Nantucket is certainly, it's a great little location, but I don't think it had quite the variety and the character that you would find like you find on Martha's Vineyard. Right.
I can't imagine that movie taking place anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty iconic now. It was being an extra in the film was, an incredible experience for me. It was like a lot of things in Jaws. It just kind of like happened. It was one of these things that, I just kind of walked into. And it was that spring when the film came out, they had a special screening in Oak Bluffs for us. And as I mentioned earlier, I think in some ways, a lot of the people who went to that screening in Oak Bluffs were kind of thinking, oh, we're going to see our friends and our neighbors, and we're going to see where they shot this. And it was going to be sort of like a who's who, or almost like a home movie for the island, and people were completely blown away and devastated by how terrifying the film was, and how everything worked out in such a way, because most of the people on the island knew how long it took to shoot the film, the challenges that were going on, that there was just a great deal of, and this is one of the things about the making of Jaws that I think is so interesting, and why, Joe and I, we met a couple of years ago and started talking about this project together, Making the Monster, about the making of Jaws, was that, the shark issues and so forth with being rushed into production. It's really the tip of the iceberg of what happened on Martha's Vineyard. There were more challenges than most people can even really understand.
Sure.
Between people, between the elements, there was elements of sabotage. There was elements of just all these things that happen. If anything could go wrong during the production, it often did. And then suddenly things started to click. But that crew had to hang on and just work and work and work through the problems until they were past those problems. Right. And I'm sure a great deal of tension and stress and apprehension about what could possibly be, where could things finally start to help and make things, turn a direction so that they knew they were going to be turning in something that was going to be, even complete the film, considering in the beginning how many challenges that they had.
Right.
It's incredible. I mentioned we were talking at the top of the episode about the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, at least in that one scene being animatronic. And I was watching a little 20, 30 minute behind the scenes of the filming of that shot. And one thing they weren't prepared for was, there's a lot of rain falling in that scene. That animatronic would saturate, get real heavy, and his movements then would become choppy. So they'd have to stop shooting, stop the water, and the crew would spend 4 to 6 hours just drying him off, getting him moving smoothly again, just to get another 20 minutes of footage, before they'd have to stop and start the process over. So seeing this, knowing that's in 1993, and in 1975 they put the whole shark in the water, the real ocean. Mm-hmm. I can't even begin to imagine the trials and tribulations. It's like Dave said, you could probably never wrap your head around all of them.
Makes you appreciate movies more when you find out the hardships that were going on during the making of the movie.
Oh, yeah. Too. Yeah, because it's not just something done for money. Blood, sweat, and tears, vision.
Literally.
Yeah, it's all there. And, Dave, you growing up on the island and, not only having that part in the film, but from what I'm picking up from you is, there's so many landmarks, so many people on the island were in the film. It's such a part of the culture and the community there that it's, no wonder so many years later you spearheaded Return of the Orca, which was rebuilding the Orca boat from the film. Are you able to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it's one of these stories that kind of comes out of the beginning of the project. When Joe and I met, and I described to Joe Making the Monster, and we began to collaborate and talk about how we could move this project forward. And it really, to understand the Return of the Orca project, you need to understand how we began with Making the Monster. And Making the Monster, it began basically, it started as just a feature film idea that was really centered around the crew of Jaws. What did they go through? What was it like personally for them to experience being thrown into a situation where they were now on this island thousands of miles from home and working on a project that was posing every possible challenge with regard to working on the real ocean, dealing with the mechanical shark that they had never built before, dealing with locals, dealing with, the local government. Joe had a lot of experiences dealing with the selectmen in trying to get many of his sets built, for example, Quint Shack out at Menemsha, and, understanding how to negotiate all these different challenges on every level when you're trying to just make a great film and you run into situations that you didn't anticipate because you're in unknown territory. But, we developed the idea into a multi-part limited television series because Jaws was shot over, 159 days on Martha's Vineyard, plus many weeks out on, in California, between the backlot and Catalina Island and other places. So it really wouldn't be done right and comprehensively in a feature film. And, Joe and I are both huge fans of episodic television like Breaking Bad and other serialized dramas in which you always want that cliffhanger. What's going to happen? We set up get to the end of an episode. That they're having problems. How are they going to solve these problems? Is anybody going to hit their breaking point? Where is the tension in the relationships, and how is that going to develop? And you always want, great television is about making you want to see the next episode. So we've been developing this project, and Joe had me out to his home in California to interview a number of the crew because we wanted to both get those interviews for the sake of research for the writing staff that I'm working with, as well as having some of the interviews actually appear in the series, kind of like or Band of Brothers, when you see the actual people who participated in, the events set up the beginning of the episode, and then you get into the docudrama phase, where you actually see the characters and the actors. And that's the important thing. A lot of people do get easily confused, thinking that this is going to be a documentary series. No, it's a docudrama. It's like the Apollo 13 of the making of Jaws. We're going to have actors. We have scripts. We want to be able to shoot as much on Martha's Vineyard at the actual locations as possible. And for, people like Joe and others to be represented by actors and for their voices from 1974 to be brought into the present and to understand what they went through. But one of the things that I knew that we were going to need for this project was an orca, because if there's any one prop from Jaws besides the shark that is indeed a necessary component, the second act of Jaws is basically all takes place aboard the Orca, and there's plenty of drama. We've all heard about the tensions between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss, and they were out at sea shooting for a long time. Everybody got seasick. They shot in different places. They were off the east side of Martha's Vineyard in the open ocean, where the elements were just pounding that boat and the whole crew on multiple vessels. They had many, many boats that were supporting the production out there. So one of the gentlemen that I met during the development of the project is Chris Crawford. And Chris was hired by Joe back in '74 to take the original boat that they purchased, the Warlock, which was a Nova Scotia-style fishing vessel, a lobster boat, really. They're kind of like the tractors of the sea out here. They do all this work. They basically they haul traps. They do sword fishing. They're built to be utility vessels, and sometimes they get converted into pleasure craft and things like that. And the Warlock had been sort of turned into a bit more of a leisure vessel. When they picked it up, it was you could see the finishes on it were a little bit more well done, and maybe somebody was actually using it for enjoying, just fishing and going out there and just being out on the water. So Chris was hired by Joe, and I met Chris on the vineyard. He still lives there in the same house that Jaws built. When he worked on Jaws, converting the Warlock into the Orca. And he hired all of the people that he knew who would be the most seasoned and adept and fastest, because I think he said it took them about 6-7 weeks to get the Warlock turned into the Orca, and those were long days and very little time off and to be able to meet that schedule. And the next thing that happened was Chris was hired to actually be the production pilot of the Orca. So anytime you see the Orca in the movie underway, it's basically Chris, ducking down behind, the window or something like that. And it looks like maybe Hooper is driving the boat or Robert Shaw is driving the boat. And for moments, it looks like Roy Scheider is driving the boat. But at all times, it was either Chris or Fred Zendar. There was two of them, basically. And I think that but Chris did a lot of the work on driving the vessel. And it's funny, I brought up the 4K release. It just came out for the 45th anniversary of the film. And if you look closely, you'll see there's 4 people on the Orca in some long shots. So I don't think you necessarily would have seen it in the Blu-ray or the VHS copy, but in the 4K. And I pay attention because I was like, Chris has got to be in one of these shots. There's just got to be at some point. They didn't, there was no CGI. Anyway, Chris and I basically started looking for a boat that could become the next Orca for making the monster, and identified one on the North Shore of Massachusetts in Amesbury. The original Warlock back in '74 was purchased in Marblehead, North Shore of Massachusetts as well. And that's where most of these boats, you're going to find them. They come from Nova Scotia. They go through Maine, New Hampshire, and get used up through, sometimes they get as far south as like Fall River or Rhode Island. But this is the area where you find those kinds of boats. So, but we're working on developing, making the monster. We have this boat. We move it to Martha's Vineyard. We basically get it on a truck, bring it over on the ferry, and bring it to the vineyard and put it up on what they call on the hard, basically up on land on some stilts, some jacks, and say, okay, well, when we basically need to get this thing, get it ready to be able to be converted into an Orca for the television production once we're ready to hit the ground. Well, we have, things are moving along, and there's some relationships that Joe has set me up with that has actually gotten the project further along, and we'd love to be able to announce that at the right time, some of the people that we're working with, because people have gotten a lot of interest in being able to develop this story. But a lot of them, and like I work in television here in Boston as well, everybody got shut down by COVID. March comes around and basically no cameras are rolling. Everybody's basically having to hunker down and do their best to sort of work from home. And that means no productions are really able to do anything. Post-production and editing of any project that had already been shot could certainly go on. So I said, well, we've got this boat and it's sitting here, and what is it that we could do? And, it's funny, over the last couple of years, Joe and I have talked about, the Jaws phenomenon and how Jaws is still so popular, and other things like we actually have grown a huge great white shark problem off the coast of Massachusetts. Right. 2 years ago, we had a fatality. A young man was boogie boarding off of Wellfleet on Cape Cod, and he was bitten and bled out on the beach, unfortunately, and died. And just a few weeks ago, we had our first fatality from a great white shark off Harpswell Island in Maine. And Maine has never had a great white shark, fatal great white shark attack. More and more beaches are closing this summer. There were beaches that had never been closed before because of shark sightings. And it's a growing issue because we have this huge seal population that continues to grow. They're federally protected. The water does get warmer, because of climate change. We've seen the water temperature slowly over time continue to get warmer and warmer. And I decided that maybe the best thing to do, and yes, making the monster is likely to have a future, and we will need an Orca for that. But I thought, what if we could be part of doing something actually helpful today? Return to the Orca has been formed as a mission to be part of shark research and exploration and education. Cool. We just recently partnered with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy and Greg Scommel. Greg Scommel is kind of like the Matt Hooper of Cape Cod. He's the shark biologist on record. He's on Discovery Channel Shark Week every year. He's a great guy, knows as much about sharks as anybody in this area, and has been successfully tagging great whites with the transponders that we have, all these buoys that basically detect where they are in the water, and has seen a great rise in the shark population, and is very excited to actually be able to get aboard the Orca 3. We're calling it the Orca 3 because there was 2 Orcas for the film, the original Orca, and then the fiberglass, duplicate of the original Orca that couldn't sail, but basically was used as a prop to, put the final climactic battle with Chief Brody on, so it could sink and raise, and they could reset it for doing more takes. So the Orca 3, the idea is the mission will be that she is a research and exploration and education vessel off Martha's Vineyard, because when I go to the vineyard, I've been going to the vineyard my entire life ever since I lived there as a kid. I went to the beach this past summer off South Beach, and I saw no less than 7 seals in the water in under an hour.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
I have never seen, I mean, 2 summers ago, I would see a seal or two, my whole day.
Right.
And now I'm seeing 7 in under an hour. And there are guards who are basically whistling and telling everybody to get out of the water. And I've been talking with Greg Scommel more and more, and he says there's 2 islands just off of Martha's Vineyard, No Man's Island, which used to be basically an Air Force bombing site that they would just sort of pilots would practice on. Now it's a protected turn reserve, and also a huge location for seals to basically, lie out on the beaches and sun themselves. And then there's another island called Muskeget Island just off the east side of Martha's Vineyard, which is the largest seal birthing population in the United States. Wow. So between those 2 spots, the theory is, and this is the problem, nobody, the Orca 3 is going to fulfill a gap because there is nobody doing research around Martha's Vineyard with regard to great white sharks. They do a great deal of research off of Cape Cod, north of the island, because that's where all these sharks are at the moment. But we've been seeing expansion of the shark population, and we're understanding that now this situation isn't staying the way it is. It's dynamically changing. The water gets warmer. The seals are continuing to grow in population. And the Orca 3 could actually be something that is going to be part of understanding the greater picture of what's happening with the great white shark population in the area. And because of what the boat is, how it represents from the film, people are interested in seeing, we've got, luckily we've gotten a great deal of press. Everybody's very interested in the story, and I appreciate you gentlemen being interested as well. Mm-hmm. But I think it's because people say, the Orca is coming back. We haven't had, the Orca was basically, like Joe says, they throw away these props, Right. The Orca 2 was left on the Vineyard and was taken apart. Lynn Murphy basically took possession of it. And over time, it just kind of got picked apart by people wanting to get a piece of the Orca 2. And the original Orca went to the backlot lake on Universal Studios and just kind of dry rotted away until they finally destroyed it and wasn't preserved. And so
that's not quite true. No, it wasn't rotting away. Stephen used to go there and sit on it, but some executive wasn't familiar with it and said, "What is this old boat doing here?" and had it demolished.
Oh my God!
He was pretty upset about that.
I thought I had seen an interview with Steven in which he said that there were termites and dry rot, and that somebody decided it just was not.
Well, they didn't have to destroy it. They could have maintained it.
Yeah,
certainly. Yeah, I think in the end, however it led to the basically losing the boat, it was just, and it was something that Steven was very unhappy about because Steven would go to the boat very often. It was kind of a place that he would sort of remember what it was like to film Jaws. And it was something that even after the making of Close Encounters and other projects, it was just sort of a place that he admitted in an interview that it was kind of a place that he would kind of work out his trauma. Working on Jaws was one of the most difficult experiences for him. So in many ways, it was kind of upsetting to lose that location, that place that he could sort of process what he went through. But I heard you mentioned the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
I did, only because after the movies were made, they had set it on the lot, just where anybody could walk past it. People taking tours, people just visiting the amusement parks, and over time, people started breaking little pieces off that they could take home as souvenirs. And over time, this iconic prop, it's one of the, just like the Orca, it's a character as much as the people in it.
Right.
In the other, in the film, it's just sitting there decaying. And you would think that people, with the Orca, with the DeLorean, et cetera, would see these things as such, iconic props. We need to preserve these things, not just, destroy. I can't imagine.
But, the studio sold the Orca when we got back from location. I mean, that's how much confidence they had in the movie. They got rid of one of the main props. They sold it to some grip. So when the movie became successful, then they had to go find it and buy it back.
Wow.
And he got a pretty good markup on that price.
I was just going to say, somebody made out.
The original chair, Quint's chair, I think sold for like $15,000. And the letters, Orca, which I had done in brass, they were pulled off and sold separately for a lot. So, that's the way things go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Pete Spidetti in Providence, Rhode Island has the fighting chair. And Joe, I think the number is actually he paid more than $30,000 at auction for that chair.
I heard it was 15.
Yeah, when I talked to him, he said it was over 30. He did get the rod and reel, the original rod and reel that Quint uses in the chair with the first encounter with the shark. That might have been closer to actually 15. And he's actually got the toe fin. This guy spent a lot of money. I think he's just waiting for someday to cash it in for his retirement to have it. But he has quite a few screen-used props, including the actual production sign that they hung over the Christine Peace House, where the production offices were in Edgartown. Joe, you might have painted that sign. Is that correct? The production sign that hung over the office?
Well, I didn't paint it, but I had somebody paint it, yes, of course.
Okay.
I had, some signs painted, and I had a very small crew. I brought a painter and a carpenter, and I used mostly locals, except signs and things like that, and the big poster, the big billboard. I had a lot of that done at the studio at the sign shop there that I was very familiar with, and then they sent out to the vineyard,
Right. Funny you guys mentioned Back to the Future and the DeLorean. Joe actually hired a gentleman named Kevin Pike, who was basically working at a restaurant that Joe and other production crew were at. And they met because Joe had left behind in the restaurant a copy of the storyboards that he was using. And Kevin Pike brought them out into the parking lot when Joe and his colleagues were leaving. And basically Joe offered him a job to be able to work on the production. Kevin Pike went on to actually design the DeLorean for Back to the Future years later.
Thank God you left that book in there, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, he worked on a number of things. He did work on Close Encounters and Jaws 2 and, followed his career.
Incredible.
That's the way you do it,
Get your foot in the door and then keep working the rest of yourself in, right?
Well, there's so many stories on the vineyard.
Yeah.
There were so many people from the vineyard who I think that was the beginning for them that they didn't expect until the production showed up, and they went on to work so long on the film and make such good relationships and contacts that it changed their lives and created new careers for them. That was a sort of milestone for a lot of people because movies weren't really, I think the only other movies shot in the Boston area or in the Cape area, there had been a couple. I think we had The Brinks Job with Peter Falk that was shot in the area, Friends of Eddie Coyle, but it wasn't a large location for movie making in any way. And so it was really and of course Jaws 2 came back for some production, not a great deal. A lot of that was shot down in Florida, but
Yeah, but there's a reason for that.
Well, Joe, you can tell that story.
Yeah, the thing is, the vineyard was great in some respects, but I scouted that. I got on the vineyard, actually, it was on December 17th, 1973. And so I scouted the whole East Coast, Long Island, but it was snow on the beaches, and it was just deserted, but it was beautiful, but there was nobody out there. So that was great, and the island worked perfectly, and the depth of the water was perfect, 25 feet, with a small tide, 2 feet, where here on the West Coast it's 14, 12 feet. Anyway, that was fine. But then come June and July, and the view out there in the ocean is just loaded with boats. And so we had a real problem, not only with the shark not having the time to test it, Stephen didn't want to see any boats out there. He wanted just an empty. He wanted these guys isolated.
Gotcha.
That's why they broke the radio and they're isolated. So Stephen was so firm about this. He doesn't want to see anything. Well, it was so difficult to get everybody, the boats, to sail in a different direction. Some people, we would send little boats out there. Would you mind sailing? Some did. Some were just, no, they're going to do what they're going to do. So that's one of the big time-consuming parts of the movie and the schedule. And Stephen was, for a young guy, was very strong. No, I'm not going to see any boats. And the studio was pretty upset about that. So just the problems there. So on Jaws 2, I was shooting the movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind in Mobile, Alabama, and Pensacola. I'd go on Sundays to the beach in Pensacola, and it was a beautiful beach and nobody out there. So when we did Jaws 2, we decided to do all the basic run-by stuff on the island, familiar stuff, and then all the shark stuff we did in Pensacola, Navarre Beach. And now we had no problem with any boats. So, so the island was perfect, except it wasn't. And not only was it, there was a lot of political things there because of the Kennedy thing, Chappaquiddick, and Dick Zanuck was very concerned about the shooting there. And what Stephen did, because the selectmen were very, we don't want, we got rich people living here. We don't want the movie shot here. But he hired all those selectmen and put them in the movie. So they got into it. And then we were there earlier than the tourist season, so we started using the motels, hotels, and stuff. And then, as I said, I bought a painter and a carpenter, so I hired all local, the people that needed work. Right. So it worked out. It worked out fine, except for too many boats out in the ocean.
I think if there were any boats in those shots, it would totally take from it. Because why is the shark just coming after this boat?
Right. There's all those other ones back there. Why are you picking that one?
I mean, I guess they're throwing the chum out, but all the same, you think it'd be messing with somebody else along the way.
I think they needed to feel like they were the only. It was a private battle between them and the shark, and there was no help coming.
That was a unique thing that Stephen did. If you look at the movie and forget about the shark, it's the relationship between those two guys. Right. They're tough fisherman, the archaeologist, young, smart-ass kid, and then, the sheriff who didn't want to be on a boat anyway. And their relationship, and then there's a big shark that's going to get them.
Right. It makes everything that much better.
That's what made it,
I've got one more question I'm going to throw kind of at both of you here, and it might even be a stupid question, but we'll see. Let's find out. If a fourth installment of Jaws was being done today, and both of you were brought on to work on this film, would you, with the technologies available today, would you still go through all the trials, the tribulation, the hell that making these films originally with practical effects was? Would you do that all again? Or would you lean more toward the CGI or effects like that?
My opinion, CGI has been terrific. It wasn't so terrific before because, what the problem with CGI is they overuse it. Yeah. If they have one shark, they could have 1,000 sharks. But I would build an animatronic full-size thing for close-ups that interrelate with the actors. Because you're not always having to act against green screen. And then I think the rest of the shark activity, I would do CGI.
Okay, there you go.
I would agree with Joe on a level, except the only thing I would think is I think what makes Jaws work is a lot of intangibles that at the time of the filmmaking were not really identified as the best way that they needed. They knew that they had some challenges, and so I really, again, and I look at films like Alien and other really effective horror and thriller stories as being ones that allow your imagination to be the one that really scares you the most. And I would not, I would think that you'd want to still hold back, make that shark count when it shows up. And, and I think that, today, you've got guys like Greg Nicotero and others who are incredible practical effects designers who can create incredibly great-looking sharks and create moments where those, the appearance of the shark really matters, and it's not something where I think you need to fill the film with as much shark as you can possibly fill it. I think that's why we have things like Sharknado, to have fun with that kind of thing.
Get your fill there.
Well, but this is what I'm saying, David. You built the shark or it interacts with somebody, but for long shots, why do you have to build a big shark?
Right. And I think that CGI has gotten to a point where it's really hard to be able to see the CGI being used. I think it's gone through a period of maturation. Right. And there are shots that are just probably very, very almost impossible to pull off unless you do it with CGI. But I would let the story, I would let the characters, I would let the script be the real priority in telling the story if you were to make another Jaws film. And I think you would really, this is something that comes up a lot in the community is, should there be another Jaws? And God forbid you bring up a remake. That's the four-letter word.
Definitely.
Jaws.
Yeah, no way.
And I agree. There's no need to do that. But I think that, the story could live on, but I think that there needs to be a fresher take on it. And I think that, using the technology smartly and intelligently, with a really talented director and a really great design team, with a script that really says, yeah, this is deserving of going back into this franchise and telling another story. Right. Are
you saying telling another story or remaking it?
Not remaking it.
Are you saying
the next installment?
So you're saying a Jaws 5?
Right. Yeah, because there was 4 films.
Yeah,
but if there was Jaws 5, let's say
Revenge.
Yeah, it was Jaws: The Revenge that took place in the Bahamas.
I was not even aware of this one. I got some watching to do.
Yeah.
Well, I could tell you stories about that, but no, because
go ahead, Joe.
On Jaws 3, I didn't use Lorraine. Lorraine is married to Sid Sheinberg, who was the president of Universal, and we used her on 1 and 2, but not on 3. So when I was sort of through with making shark movies, they made her one of the principal characters in 4.
Right.
So they brought her back. And no, it didn't work, because people don't even remember it. They do talk about 1, 2, and 3, but 4 is not mentioned very often.
Well, they made the shark a serial killer almost.
In 4, the shark follows the Brody family to the Caribbean.
Right.
Vendetta shark.
And Ellen Brody's character has flashbacks to moments that she was never even present for. Like "Smile, you son of a bitch" and these things.
Right.
And the practical shark, the shark roars like a tiger at one moment. I mean, it's just it was. If you watch the film, listen, I'm not going to slam filmmakers about, I think that every film has its own, challenges, and they all have stories about what challenges they went through. But the film stands on its own as taking a lot of liberties in storytelling. I'll just put it there.
Right.
Now you have me scared to watch it. I don't know. It sounds kind of fun, though, all the same. I want to thank both of you guys for being here today. This has been an absolute pleasure. Again, if you want to send us a link when, Making the Monster is available or where people can get it, we will definitely be pushing that out to our listeners.
And your Indiegogo that's currently going on for it.
Sure, thank you.
Yes. So I encourage people to keep an eye out for that. And also Joe Alves' book, Designing Jaws. Again, a lot of what we talked about, he said he had pre-production illustrations. There's also handwritten location and production notes, blueprints of the shark, on-set photos, anything a Jaws fan needs. So and I was able to find that book on most anywhere books can be bought. I saw it on Amazon. I think I might have to listen.
It's on them.
I say listen to it because I listen to my books. I can't read them. But gentlemen, Joe, David, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Take care.
All right, and there you have it, our conversation with Joe Alves and David Bigelow, talking all about Jaws. That was so much fun to talk to those guys.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And like I said in the episode, it's only because of you, Randy, that I've seen Jaws.
Yeah.
And so glad you brought that movie over. Because I was kind of reluctant at first to go into it because again, so many people had been like, well, it's an older film. You might be desensitized. No.
That's like when I saw The Shining. I was told, "Oh, this movie's so scary." No.
Well, and I was actually
Yeah, there's parts of it that
this
I don't
movie
like,
had me on the edge of my seat.
Oh,
And
yeah.
not only that, all the characters were great.
you get so emotionally invested in them.
Yeah, there's like a whole cabin scene where Quint and Richard Dreyfuss' character are exchanging. They're showing each other their scars,
Right.
and they had been at each other's necks the whole
Right, where
time
they
during
start
the
to
movie,
bond.
and that's right when they. That was such a cool scene. Great movie.
Well,
but
the other thing too, I mentioned earlier, we watched. My dad and I watched that movie before we went to Florida. We actually went to Universal, I believe, the year after the Jaws ride opened there.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. But anyway, yeah.
It's not even there anymore now, is it?
No, it got shut down pretty quick. But I remember being on that and just seeing the shark, pop up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was crazy.
I think they still have the dock with the shark hanging
I think you're right.
there that you can go take
Oh,
pictures
really?
of. They do.
They caught him and strung him up.
I don't know if it's actual Jaws they're supposed to have strung up, like Bruce, or if it's like, in the movie how they caught the shark that wasn't it and they all thought it was it and they had him strung up on. I don't know if it's supposed to be like a recreation of that scene or if it's just supposed to be. But yeah, they left the dock there. But anyway, here we go down another foxhole of Jaws conversation. Again, I want to thank Joe and David for taking the time to talk with us tonight. This was amazing. And with nothing left to say, Jack, what have we on the website?
You go to cameo'dpodcast.com. You can check out show highlights, listen to the show, follow us on all our social media, become a patron, buy some merch, follow us on our YouTube page. And if you'd like to be a guest and promote your work, send us an email on our contacts page.
And once again, don't forget to find us on Twitter at CannedAirPod and on Instagram at canned_air. And if you like what we're doing, head over to patreon.com/CannedAirPod, where for, what is it, $5 a month? That's right. Get access to the Canned Air Patreon pod. And
a pin.
And a pin, that's right. I forgot about the goodies on there. There's pins. Jack added the Canned Air nightlights over on the tier.
The highest tier.
I mean, show your Canned Air love by getting the merch, people. Getting that merch. Canned Air merch. What am I forgetting? Anything, gentlemen?
If you're a professional looking for representation, please check out our friend Steve Joyner. He's a great guy, hooking us up. He's representing quite a few talented individuals, and you just can't say enough good things about this guy. So
yeah, give him a call, 816-605-4561. Again, like Randy said, need that professional representation? Well, here's the number for you. One more time, 816-605-4561. Steve Joyner.
And also make sure to check out David's Indiegogo for the Orca project.
Yeah.
We actually, Canned Air's, put their money where their mouth is, and we've we've contributed to that. So we're really
helping making it happen.
Yes.
Canned Air's making a difference, boys. All right. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. So until next time, I am Jeremy Colley.
I'm Jack Doherty.
And I'm Randy Hardenbrook.
Thank you for listening, and always be excellent to each other.
Frozen. Watch me ice skate.
Wait, come back. The ice could break.
Whoops. Help.
Quickly walk back to the edge.
Stop, you'll break through the ice.
Snow Job!
Grab this branch. You should have been listening to Canned Air.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Snow Job, how'd you get your name?
G.I. Joe!
This has been a Canned Air production.